Shabbat Shalom. The sociologist and anthropologist Margaret Mead is famously quoted as saying, quote, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." But in this week's Torah portion, we get treated to a longish scenario in which a small group of thoughtful, or at least intelligent and committed citizens tries to instigate change, and it all goes badly wrong. Korach, for whom the Torah portion is named, is a cousin of Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. He gets together with a group of like-minded folk and comes to complain. "You have gone too far," he says, "for all the congregation is holy, all of it, and God is among them. Why do you raise yourselves above God's community?" And we all know what happens in the end, yes? Far from being able to raise himself, he ends up down underground. What was Korach's mistake? Where did Korach go so badly wrong? One possibility is that he personally was seeking power. But whether he personally wants to lead or to elevate the Levites, his family, to be the leadership team, or whether he's, if you want, an anarchist who wants to do away with leadership altogether, his mistake is that he shows a fundamental misunderstanding of what it means to be a leader. His language is the key to the visual image that he has of leadership. Lama titnasu, he says. Why do you raise yourselves up from the root nasa? Why do you wield your power up there while people down below have no choice but resentfully to do what they're told? And we know that even on a plain reading of the text, Korach's words do not fit with the reality. We've already learned that Moses' abiding characteristic is that he is anav, he's humble. Aaron, we know, as being so loving and conciliatory that he'll more or less lie down flat in order to avoid an argument. And you might also have noticed that the children of Israel, far from resentfully muttering and getting on with being bossed about, are not really noteworthy for their quietness in following instructions. Far from it. They complain all the time and directly to the leadership. So Korach's accusations make no sense. Moses and Aaron, in fact, stand for models, if you want to think of it this way, of what Jewish leadership should be like. It's not a leadership by consensus as such. There are people, there are figureheads of power. They're in charge, they make the decisions. But as Rabbi Jonathan Sacks has pointed out, and really being the chief rabbi of England and the Commonwealth, he should know, a leader is a public servant rather than an authority. Even a king is not allowed to overreach himself and act haughtily. In the Talmud, we find a piece in which Rabban Gamliel, who was a great rabbi, offered leadership roles to two other rabbis who, guess what, were reluctant to accept. "Do you think I'm conferring rulership on you?" asked Rabban Gamliel. "No, I'm conferring servitude on you." And by accusing Moses and Aaron of being dictators, all that Korach does is to give us a look into the mechanics of his own mind. Korach's mistake is that he doesn't understand the true nature of leadership. Another possible understanding is that his arguments do actually have some merit, but their merit is limited. In the Midrash, which I had the pleasure of studying this week with the Torah on Tuesday group, the rabbis provide us with a number of additional Korach v. Moses scenarios. In the first, Korach arrays himself and all of his 250 followers in talitot that are solidly blue, solidly dyed with the techelet dye that is supposed to be in the blue thread of the tzitzit. And then he comes to Moses and says, "See this talit? Does it need tzitzit? It's all blue." In the second scenario, he asks Moses, you've got this room, it's full of Torah scroll after scroll after scroll. Does it need a mezuzah? And for answers to those questions, for a riposte to Korach, let me turn to the answers from the Torah on Tuesday class, with thanks to them. Their first response was that the Torah says that a four-cornered garment requires a fringe. It doesn't matter what color your garment is. The mitzvah is to put a fringe on it. And that is the mitzvah. So yes, Korach, your talit that is all blue needs a tzitzit. The answer to the second question is that they perceive that there is a difference between the outside and the inside. Regardless of the content of any given room, a mezuzah marks that room to those who pass by as being a Jewish room, and that home as being a Jewish home. And therefore, yes, theoretically, a room full of Torah scrolls would need a mezuzah. We can see, can't we, that the mistake that Korach is making here is that he's being too literal. He seems to misunderstand or completely ignore that there is a symbolic value to things, a kind of alternative logic that speaks to other parts of our psyche in a way that may not necessarily be rational. We need tzitzit. We need mezuzot, because they are powerful symbols that speak the language of our souls in a way that we might not be able actually to articulate or rationalize. But we're better for having these symbols. We are better because they link us to a sense of mystery that guides our lives. And in the same way as there are things that happen in our lives that we don't understand, perhaps there need to be some aspects of Torah that we also have to take on trust, even though they defy rational explanation. Korach is not only mistaken, but obnoxious in using these chukim to bring Moses and Aaron and the Torah and, as Rabbi Bernhard observed, God into disrepute. This is a sneaky trick. It's underhand, and ultimately he will end up underground. Both Korach's challenge to the leadership and Korach's challenge to symbolism suggest that he is more wrong than right, but in all fairness to the way that Korach has been read within the tradition, there are other ways to understand this passage. On the face of it, you see, his argument that this is a holy people does have merit. In the Sinai narrative, we are told that the offer that God makes to the people is that they should be Mamlechet Kohanim v'Goy Kadosh, a kingdom of priests and a holy people. And we should ask, even though we may dislike Korach, can he be in the wrong for only reminding Moses of what it was that God originally said? We should sit with this for a moment, even, as I say, if we dislike Korach. We won't be the first in our tradition to sit with a more positive reading of Korach. A number of Hasidic commentators see him as being motivated by a craving to move closer to God. And that, by the way, might be the reason that a man who is so overtly smart didn't balk at being asked to take a fire pan and put incense on the fire pan and approach God, despite the fact that his cousins Nadav and Avihu not so long ago died a very strange death as a result of having done just that exact same thing. We should note also that the fire pans after the tragedy are preserved and not put away in a place to be ashamed of. They are hammered into plating for the altar, where they're going to be in full sight of the population every day, as if to say that something holy came out of this. Something enduring has been said. Some kind of permanent statement has been made. Far from being the villain of the piece, we should ask, is Korach its hero? Is Moses mistaken in taking the whole thing out of context? And the answer, I think, is an answer that lies in the later part of the tradition. The rabbinic collection of Bon Mot, this is what you would find in rabbinic days on the bookstand as you make your way out of Barnes & Noble. You know those book stacks? In that properly belongs the collection of wisdom known as Pirkei Avot. And in an unattributed teaching, we find the following saying, which is going to be familiar to some of you. I hope I'm going to pronounce it right, however. This is one of those things where American English and English are different. You'll tell me. I'm going to try every controversy. Yes? Or is it controversy? Controversy? Thank you very much. Okay. Every controversy which is for the sake of heaven will in the end be of permanent value. But any controversy that is not for the sake of heaven will not endure. Which controversy was for the sake of heaven? The one between Hillel and Shammai. Which was not for the sake of heaven? The one of Korach and his company. The anonymous author is suggesting, I think, that it wasn't the content of Korach's arguments that was at fault. I believe that you can very easily imagine a page in the Talmud in which the rabbis would ask, if your talit is completely blue, do you need to put tzitzit on it? If you have a room full of Sifrei Torah, do you need to put a mezuzah on the door? It's very much the kind of questions that we can imagine the rabbis asking. But Korach is at fault in the way that he conducts the argument. In contrast to the schools of Hillel and Shammai, whose arguments were conducted with respect, whose children even married each other, the Talmud told us, Korach's arguments are binary. Either you're right or I'm right. We can't both be right. If I'm right, then you are wrong. And there's only one way that that kind of argument can go. And in the end, all that is left, quite literally, is scorched earth. Contrast a controversy l'shem shamayim, it means for the sake of heaven, or maybe even for God's sake. A controversy l'shem shamayim will always leave something behind. We follow Hillel, for example, in lighting one Hanukkah light on the first light and working up to 8. But we can see that there is also merit in Shammai's argument that you begin with the full force of the miracle and gradually, slowly, you take it down to a scale that will work in your life. An argument l'shem shamayim has no ego. An argument l'shem shamayim has no agenda. Even though there will be a winner and a loser in an argument l'shem shamayim, the process is a fruitful process, and the discourse is respectful discourse. Rabbi Bernhard has already mentioned that on Monday we are installing Adat Ariel's new board. Before every meeting, this is a board that recites a blessing that acknowledges the mitzvah of engaging in the needs of the community. In its composition and in its conduct, our board strives and continues to strive to act l'shem shamayim. We try to avoid the pitfalls of Korach and his company, and this is something of which a synagogue can indeed be proud, and we should be. I want to end where I began. It's not dissent that's the problem. The episode of Korach in the Torah should not make us scared of argument or discussion. What we should learn, what we should take away, is that we have choices about how we dissent. Are our conversations with our families, with our colleagues, with our community going to be reductive, like Korach, or productive, like Hillel and Shammai? If the latter, then we can indeed look forward to being that committed community of thoughtful people who have the power to change the world. I look forward to seeing you at our board's installation on Monday night. I wish you a weekend of productive, constructive discussion, and I wish you a Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.